For some people, a normal day comes with an extra layer nobody else seems to be carrying. A crowded train, a tense meeting, a friend's bad mood, all of it lands, and lands hard, long before anything's actually happened to them personally. By the time evening arrives, they're not tired from what they did. They're tired from what they took in. This isn't the same as being shy or introverted or just sensitive, in the dismissive sense people sometimes mean. It's closer to having a nervous system with the volume turned up, sound, mood, tension, other people's unspoken stuff, all coming through louder and less filtered than it does for most people around them. The confusing part is that it doesn't always look like anything from the outside. Someone can seem completely fine in a room, nodding along, holding a conversation, and be quietly overwhelmed the entire time, spending energy just to keep functioning at a pace everyone else finds effortless. The two terms get used interchangeably, but they describe slightly different things. Highly sensitive person, a term from psychologist Elaine Aron's research, describes a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, a nervous system that processes all incoming information, sound, light, emotional tone, more deeply than average. Empath usually refers more specifically to picking up on other people's emotions, sometimes to the point of feeling them as your own. In practice, most people who relate to one term relate to both, because a nervous system that processes everything more deeply tends to pick up other people's emotional states more deeply, too. Neither term is a clinical diagnosis. They're descriptive labels for a real, measurable trait that a meaningful minority of people have, not a personality quirk invented for social media. It's easy to hear sensitive and assume it means something's wrong or something needs fixing. Research on sensory processing sensitivity suggests otherwise. It looks like a normal variation in how nervous systems are wired, present in a meaningful percentage of the population, and found across other species too, where individuals within the same group differ in how much environmental information they process. Framed that way, energy sensitivity isn't a malfunction, it's a different setting on the same basic system everyone has. Some people's systems filter more before it reaches conscious awareness. Others let more through. Neither is objectively better, but a system that lets more through will get tired faster in the same environment. And that's the part that so often gets mistaken for weakness, instead of simply being how someone's built. One of the most confusing parts of energy sensitivity is that it often arrives as plain physical tiredness, not an obvious emotional signal. Someone can come home from a perfectly nice social event and feel like they've done manual labor with no clear reason why. That's because processing more input, more tone, more unspoken emotional information takes up real cognitive and physiological resources, even when nothing dramatic has happened. The body doesn't always distinguish between processed a lot of information and did something physically demanding. Both draw on similar reserves. This is why rest that works for other people, an early night, a lie-in, doesn't always fully restore someone whose exhaustion is sensory and emotional rather than purely physical. Empathy, understanding, and sharing what someone else feels is something everyone has to some degree, and it's genuinely valuable. Energy sensitivity pushes that further into something closer to absorption, not just understanding someone's stress, but starting to feel it in your own body as though it's yours to resolve. This is where a lot of unnecessary exhaustion gets created. Empathy without a boundary around it stops being a strength and starts being a slow leak, because the sensitive person ends up carrying feelings that were never theirs to carry in the first place, on top of their own. Learning to feel with someone without absorbing their feeling entirely is a skill, not something that happens automatically just from caring. Most modern environments, open plan offices, constant notifications, back-to-back social plans are built around an average level of sensory and emotional input, not the higher end of it. For someone whose system takes in more, an ordinary Tuesday can involve genuinely more processing than it does for the people around them, even though the day looks identical from the outside. This mismatch is a big part of why sensitivity so often gets misread as a personal problem rather than an environmental one. It's not that the sensitive person can't cope with normal life, it's that normal was never calibrated with a system like theirs in mind, and no amount of trying harder changes how much input is actually coming in. Sensory processing sensitivity isn't rare. Estimates from Aron's research and later studies put it at somewhere around 15 to 20% of people, meaning in any room of 10, 1 or 2 people are likely processing that room more deeply than everyone else in it, whether they'd call themselves an empath or not. Knowing that changes the story from "something's different about me" to "this is a known, documented way of being wired, shared by a real portion of the population." It doesn't erase the exhaustion, but it does remove the isolation that so often comes with assuming you're the only one who finds ordinary life this loud. This video has focused on what energy sensitivity actually is, a real documented nervous system trait, not a flaw, not a diagnosis, and not something to apologize for. The rest of this series builds on that foundation. On Wednesday, we look at how this trait quietly shapes an entire life, not just crowded rooms. On Friday, we move into practice, how to protect your energy without shutting the people you love out in the process. If any of this has felt uncomfortably familiar, that recognition is worth trusting. This week on Healing Through Thoughts, we're naming this pattern clearly, without apology, and learning to work with it instead of constantly fighting against it.